Okay. Habitual use of GPS negatively impacts spatial memory during self-guided navigation. Now, this is something that we all take for granted. We all have GPS on our phones. This was published in 2020. Let's just see what the abstract says. Global positioning system navigation devices and applications have become ubiquitous over the last decade. However, it is unclear whether using GPS affects our own internal navigation system or spatial memory, which critically relies on the hippocampus. We assess the lifetime GPS experience of 50 regular drivers, as well as various facets of spatial memory, including spatial memory strategy use, cognitive mapping, and landmark encoding using virtual navigation tasks. We first present cross-sectional results that show that people with greater lifetime GPS experience have worse spatial memory during self-guided navigation, i.e., when they are required to navigate without GPS. In a follow-up session, 13 participants were retested 3 years after initial testing. Although the longitudinal sample was small, we observed an important effect of GPS use over time, whereby greater GPS use since initial testing was associated with a steeper decline in hippocampal dependent spatial memory. Importantly, we found that those who used GPS more did not do so because they felt they had a poor sense of direction, suggesting that extensive GPS use led to a decline in spatial memory rather than the other way around. These findings are significant in the context of society's increasing reliance on GPS. So, what happens if GPS went down tomorrow? I'm going to extend this argument. What happens if AI went down tomorrow? What happens if we discover that the use of AI is using up too many natural resources and we have to curb its usage? You no longer have access to it. What happens if entire AI operations are attacked by NPM left pad vulnerability exposure and the entire AI system goes down tomorrow? What happens when you don't have the tools that you need to accomplish the code that you need to execute and it all happens tomorrow? Where are you going to be? Now, hang on. I gotta get the right link here. Here we go. How about spell checking? The influence of spell checkers on students' ability to generate repairs of spelling errors. So the question here is essentially, if you have a spell checker automate the process of spell checking, do you become a better fixer of spelling errors or a worse or neutral? The abstract. Recent studies show that spell checkers help reduce student surface errors in writing by flagging spelling errors and giving correct spelling suggestions. The study investigates if the error correction provided by the spell checker tool in word processors are internalized by students. A quasi-experimental 2-group study was conducted on 30 Form 1 students in a school in, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Kuching, Sarawak. The learners were given dictations which contained words listed as commonly misspelled words according to Oxford University Press in 2012. The experimental group were given 3 dictations, one in which they used word processors and allowed to use the spell checker tool, and the control group was given 2 dictations, both handwritten. The data gathered were analyzed using a software for statistical analysis. This study found that while the spell checker helped the learners revise their spelling on one dictation exercise, learners still made the same errors in their spelling after the use of spell checkers. Therefore, it argues that while spell checkers help eliminate surface errors, they have very little influence on correcting the errors on the cognitive level. The programming space is obviously not excluded from having automation take away from your ability to cognitively tackle technical problems, which, by the way, is your job. Can you see a problem where when it's your job to think of cognitively designed solutions to technical problems, but your decision to solve those problems necessarily takes away your cognitive ability to come up with those solutions to begin with because you just rely on an abstraction or AI or whatever it is you're reliant on? Can you see a problem where you cannot sufficiently do your job? Oh, Spiro, you're overreacting. You're overreacting. I'm not done. Let me pull up this one. Evaluation of manual skill degradation due to automation in apparel manufacturing. What? Manual skill degradation is a common problem that production managers face in assembly lines due to frequent changes in batch styles. Since the advancement in automated machinery, reliance on manual machines has been reduced. However, due to the high cost of fully automated machinery, it is still not available on a large scale in apparel manufacturing setups, as most of the setups are in developing countries. Few related studies regarding the effects of automation on manual skills have been conducted in aviation and other emerging technological fields. Little focus was given on the effects of automation in apparel manufacturing. This exploratory study examines automation-induced performance degradation in the apparel production line. 67 sewing machine operators were initially trained on manual sewing machines to learn a complex production operation. Then, participants were divided randomly into 3 groups to experience a varied amount of automation exposure. The manual machine group kept working on the manual machines after the initial training and skill development. In contrast, the automation group shifted to automated pocket setting machines after skill development. Finally, the refresher training group rotated between manual and automated machines after the skill development. The skill retrieval assessment was carried out after 6 weeks in the production line. The result of an independent t-test showed no significant differences among performances of the 3 groups after the initial training stage. A significant increase in the average single cycle time and decreased in the right first time percent was found in the automation group, while the AS or average single cycle time decreased and the right first time percent increased among the manual machine group after the retention interval. So I had to read this a few times in order to get the sense of it, but what they're saying is the automation group, when asked to deal without automation, had a significantly higher error percentage rate or just simple inability to work without the automation versus what the manual group had to do when they switched to automation. So think about it this way. The automated group is then asked to go into the manual group. The manual group is then asked to go into the automation group. Of the two, over the long term, over the 6 weeks, which one produced higher quality results? It was the manual group that went into automation. The RTG group, which is a rotational group, it's a refresher group, which means they kind of did both, stayed neutral because they got a bit of both. The manual group outperformed both the other groups. Why? Because they understood at a more fundamental level what it was that was being asked of them when they had to go to the automated portion of things and make that switch. Whereas the automated group that began that way didn't have that encouragement, whatever you want to call it, that advantage, had no idea what they were doing once the automation went away like that. And we're just talking about sewing machines. So far, we've talked about GPS, we've talked about spell checking, and we've talked about sewing machines. So now the question becomes, just a sec, let me find the right one. I believe it's this one. Here we go. I think it's this one. So now the question becomes, if you're a programmer and you're using AI to help you to generate code, is there any risk at all that you will become a worse programmer should you have to do something without AI, or that AI can mislead you even if it continues to stay forever and ever and ever and never goes down and never goes away and never hits a wall and everything just continues to work wonderfully and magically? Are there any downsides at all to using AI when you are required as part of your job to do critical cognitive thinking in order to create systems? Even if AI is generating code for you, you still have to cognitively piece together the logical entailment of steps A, B, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As a programmer, that's your job. Is there a risk? This is from Microsoft, Cambridge, UK. I believe it's 2025, which is this year. The abstract itself reads, "The rise of generative AI, Gen AI, in knowledge workflows raises questions about its impact on critical thinking skills and practices. We survey 319 knowledge workers to investigate 1, when and how they perceive the inaction of critical thinking when using Gen AI, and 2, when and why Gen AI affects their effort to do so. Participants shared 936 first-hand examples of using Gen AI in work tasks. Quantitatively, when considering both task and user-specific factors, a user's task-specific self-confidence and confidence in Gen AI are predictive of whether critical thinking is enacted and the effort of doing so in Gen AI assisted tasks. Specifically, higher confidence in Gen AI is associated with less critical thinking, while higher self-confidence is associated with more critical thinking. Qualitatively, Gen AI shifts the nature of critical thinking toward information verification, response integration, and task stewardship. Our insight reveals new design challenges and opportunities for developing Gen AI tools for knowledge work." In other words, the more that people were trusting of Gen AI, the more people were less likely to self-admittedly use critical thinking abilities. And this is from Microsoft, someone who is no stranger to as being a proponent of AI. And I don't think that you have to read the entire study, although I did, and you can see how they broke it down. They did the demographics. They asked the proper quantitative questions. They broke down, which questions they need to ask and what are the answers they need to garner from them and the conclusions and so on and so forth. They did all of it. These guys are proponents of AI. I don't think it requires a huge logical leap to determine that when you have a reliance on AI to give you an answer that you trust, the more you trust it, the less you think. Now, again, there might be industries, scenarios, jobs, or aspects of jobs where that's okay, where you can have that level of reliance on AI, and generally you're going to come out better than you started, if not maybe neutral. But our job as programmers is nothing if not critical thinking and logical reasoning. When we offload those things to AI, we are by definition absconding a responsibility to executing those things in our brain and producing the appropriate code output to an AI system. You are literally making yourself dumber. You are neutering your own ability to even understand what AI is giving you. How can you possibly make a judgment value on AI-produced code if you do not have the ability to first handle the cognitive tasks that come with dealing with any amount of code to begin with? And even if you do, if your reliance is already dependent on a crutch, on an abstraction like a library, framework, or language in order to accomplish or complete certain things that you don't want to look into and you just want an easy button and it's all subjective and vibes based and it makes you feel good and you don't know how to talk about these things, you still cannot make a judgment value on what generative AI gives you. Any AI, you can't do it. Other industries and jobs and portions of jobs might be able to get away with this. You and I can't. It's part of our job to be able to determine these things. Reliance on it takes away our ability to determine those things. It's a negative chicken and egg situation where the feedback cycle is only negative. I'm not done. GitHub Copilot. This one isn't exactly, upon first read, it does not seem like it's a slam dunk towards what I'm arguing for here. But let me cook for a moment. So, exploring the problems. Their causes and solutions of AI pair programming, a study on GitHub and Stack Overflow. Hang on, let me see if I can go back down to, I think it's 3. Okay. So there's here we go, this. So essentially what they did was they asked programmers who use GitHub Copilot what their biggest gripes are about using GitHub Copilot. Let me see if I can zoom in on this. I need to try. Okay, this might be better. All right, because the text is a little bit small. Can I just open the image in a new tab? Here we go. Okay, perfect. Good. So you can see they asked like what are the problems, etc. And what they did was they broke it down into three. They basically just put a line in the middle. And so from left to right top, it starts with the most offending issue, and then left to right bottom leads towards the least offending issue, right? The most offending issue: version control issue, installation issue, accessing failure, startup issue, authentication failure, functionality failure. Let me turn off Dark Reader. Flashbang, I apologize. This will be brief. Keyboard compatibility issue, plugin compatibility issue, editor ADI compatibility, IDE compatibility issue, so on and so forth. Okay, let me put Dark Reader back on. Okay. So at first glance, 57.5%, the issues are like these things here. So let's just like, what are these things, right? So functionality failure refers to the abnormality of code generation related features provided by Copilot. Copilot offers various interactive features to better engage with users, such as previous next suggestion, viewing all suggestions, and configuration of shortcut keys to accept suggestions. Users may encounter exceptions when using these features. For example, a user reported that Copilot no longer suggesting on PyCharm after a period of not using it. There's a startup issue. Refers to errors or malfunctions encountered by users attempting to run Copilot. This issue results in a complete failure of Copilot to execute and is typically accompanied by error messages. Such problems may arise either during a user's initial usage of Copilot or unexpectedly after several successful runs. For example, a user failed to activate Copilot after installing it on VS Code and received an error message stating "cannot find module." Authentication failure refers to issues related to user login and authentication difficulties, accessing failure when users fail to access the Copilot server, installation issue, version control issue, adjusting the version of Copilot or its runtime, etc., etc. Now, at first glance, you might think, what does this have to do with the argument I'm making? One, do you think that the plugin for Copilot is at least partially generated by generative AI code? And let's grant that it's not. Let's just assume it's not. Let's just say it is not, that the plugins are not generated by generative AI code of any kind. For example, Copilot creating Copilot plugin code. Let's just assume that it's all handwritten code, yeah? If you are going to make the case that I should use Copilot or generative AI and I should trust it to generate any amount of code for me, hang on. You can't even make it function correctly out of the gate. You cannot even make a plugin without 57.5% of users having issues that in this day and age should not exist in code of any plugin of any kind. But you expect me to trust you that you have created an AI that I should then trust to offload cognitive thinking and code production abilities so that I don't have to do it. There is a logical entailment here whereby there's an initial set of failures that are absolutely mind-boggling that they exist to begin with, and then somehow I'm supposed to excuse these failures and go, yeah, but Copilot will do me well, or ChatGPT will do me well, or whatever the hell ever will do me well. You can't even create the mechanisms around the AI in such a way that I can use them appropriately, but then expect me to trust the thing after I've kind of ignored and swept under the rug everything that got me there to begin with. There's a logical fallacy here, which is kind of like a man behind the curtain, don't look back here, it's okay, just focus on the magic you're about to see before your eyes. That puts serious question in my mind about the use of these things and whether they actually are beneficial or have any beneficial impacts or not.